oui, on va parler quantique. Moi, c'est un sujet
Yes, we can talk about quantic. Interesting, no? Well, I like it, but I don't understand anything. Well, that's the reason why. We've got some guests. People are going to be coming onto the rostrum because there are 80 teams that work on quantum here at Saclay. So they'll explain everything about it. But before that, we're going to be talking about quantum. Here apparently is some of the best among the world, in the world rather. We've got 4 guests be joining us straight away. We've got Senellart, a doctor in quantum physics, a director at the French CNRS Institute. Thank you very much. You work at the Nanosciences and Nanotechnologies Center here at Saclay. You're also a teacher at Polytechnique and co-founder of Quandela, a startup. We also have Neil. You are International Coordinator for Quantic Strategy. David Hererra Marti is with you. Hopefully I haven't got your name wrong. Otherwise tell me if I've got it wrong. Anyway, you're a researcher, teacher at Integrated Digital Systems Division. Your company. And then Esperanza, Cuenca, Góme.
Welcome and hello, Esperanza.
Bienvenue, merci.
Vous êtes, je le dis en français, sorry to having this in French.
Je le dis en français. You are responsible for strategy and broadcasting at Multiverse Consulting. You're responsible for that strategy. Merci de votre présence. So, Alexandre, over to you. Yeah, I don't understand anything about quantum. So, I'm the person who'd be asking the more straightforward side of the questions. So, we've said developing quantum is a major challenge. For those who don't understand what it is, I think we need to perhaps review what quantics involves. So, you are a doctor, you're a research director at CNRS, at the Nanotechnology and Nanoscience unit that involves Paris-Saclay and the CNRS National Institute. You teach at Polytechnique, and you even have your own startup. So I think you're the ideal person to shed light on quantics. Now, my A-level is really in literature, so to be honest with you, I'd be very grateful if you can tell us what quantics involve with very clear hands-on examples. All right, well, I'm not going to tell you what quantic mechanics is. I can't do that in the great detail now, but in the tablet you got in your hand, for example, you've got a product which stems from the first revolution, technological revolution, based on quantum science, because of lasers and transistors were discovered. Thanks to that, we're already involved in using some material properties quantum-wise, all right? So that's not what we're going to be talking about now, because we've already gone through that massive revolution. The idea now, in this second wave of quantum, is to look at more subtle ingredients. The first is superimposition. So it's 0 and 1, for example. So you're going to superimpose 0 and 1. Now that opens vast scope of potential. I haven't got 2 possibilities, I've got an infinity of possibilities, not just 0 and 1. Also, we're going to be looking at quantum embeddedness. In other words, this is a property which describes a very disquieting situation for us, whereby 2 electrons, or 2 photons, let's say, have got a common fate. We don't know which one, but they have a common fate. And we can work on that, because if I manipulate one, I'll manipulate the other. So I'm not paralyzing my way of processing the info. That's what we're talking about now, to use these properties that were very abstract, and the founding fathers of quantum thought they were unhandleable, but now they're part and parcel of what we do in our labs, with tangible hands-on applications to do sensors, to measure certain magnetic fields, for example, and also let's do, I don't know, quantum computers that no doubt we're going to be talking about. That's right, because this is what's at stake, I think. It's often described as crucial, that this is a field of research which is the most strategic in nature. Why is it so important? Well, a quantum computer is seen as important, as so important, because it's an artifact that if we were able to put it together, we would be able to compute situations that we're totally unable to do so with the best possible calculators that we have today. So we've got an opportunity of unlocking currently incalculable circumstances. This will have applications for medicine, banking, chemistry, lots of applications. You open a boulevard of different areas of potential. You could also predict, a computer could break our encryption for IT security. Of course, that's a major point. So it's also being researched here at Paris-Saclay, a very multidisciplinary research cluster. We've reiterated that on this rostrum. But there's also the quantum cluster. So what does that encompass, and what's its role? Well, yeah, this quantum cluster is very important. It was established in 1919. It was launched by the French president also here, and a fresh wave of research a year ago. It's important, that research, because, in relation to what I've just said, this is all burgeoning. It's just appearing. What I'm talking about now is the subject of research. Some are at the stage that can be transferred into an industrial environment, an optical quantum computer possibly, but we also need to do lots of other pure science research. Startups will be associated with the university for many years to come, because we need to nourish innovation, and there should be this work hand in glove to bring out future innovations. Training as well. We're entering into a new world, aren't we, with concepts that are difficult to understand. A quantum ordinator, which won't be programmable as mainstream computers are today. We have to be done differently. And training brains, and at Saclay, we have multidisciplinary approaches. So that's great. We'll be able to use quantum physics. Quantum physics with concepts, for example, but it doesn't only get confined to physics. We need to have mathematicians, IT engineers, and because there'll be opening onto biology and what have you, we'll need biologists. So multidisciplinary approach is, we're convinced of the fact, as years have gone by, that multidisciplinary approaches in this French system, which is very siloed, it must be said, this has to be done at the grassroots level. We need to break down these silos. And we obviously need to think about the cross-sectorial approach. We need to build bonds between the private sphere and universities. And we're going to have to reinvent certain tools to pick up on certain challenges that are in the offing. Talking of challenges in the offing, what's sitting behind what France has implemented in the way of a quantum initiative. And perhaps you can tell us about this. You're the national coordinator for the quantum strategy in France. So what are its underpinnings? We've heard about our trump cards, particularly here at Paris-Saclay, but, lots of things are at stake, aren't they? We've just covered some of them. So what's going on? Yes, now when we devised the quantum strategy, our starting point was to see what was currently out there. We weren't starting from a blank page. There were ecosystems that were well put together, research that had been done. One or two startups are emerging. Quandela was there, Pascale additionally, and we built on those existing ecosystems, tapping into what had been done in the public and the private sphere. The objective being that we wanted to pick up speed, basically. Now, this is a field where, in all objectivity, when you're properly mindful of the state of play, and what's at stake, really, in investing in this field. This is a field where, we weren't lagging too far behind. The idea is to pick up speed, however, and to become a leader in the scientific field. Of course, we already have a significant stance, a number of French Nobel Prize winners in the quantum field, because we need to turn that into an economic cutting-edge advantage, and in respect of what Pascale has just said and the stakes at play. Obviously, this will set into upheavals, lots of fields, logistics, finance, to name but two. There'll be some that will have understood the value of those machines, and others not. Yes, because I think you've got that across quite clearly, that this is all breakthrough technology. It's not on the wave of an existing movement. This is a breakaway from existing technology. So Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has set in motion this quantum strategy. Now, you've mentioned laboratories, very young startups. What other stakeholders do we see? Yes, we have research outfits, universities, we have a certain number of startups and major companies, some of which are used to dealing with quantum. Others are involved in the supply chain, the value chain, if you will, for developing quantum technologies. We've also got standardization or standard-setting organizations. We've got AFNOR, for example, that set up a committee for quantum. So various players, state players, private players, but of course there are also the investors, and we're lucky enough in France to have the biggest pure player investors. We also have other investors which are more cross-cutting and obviously find it comfortable having French leadership in this field. Of course, it will also be important to have private investors over and beyond, as I say, the current state investors. So it's long-term here. It's very risky, with lots of question marks, technological, scientific, economic, regulatory question marks dangling over the entire field. So the state is stepping up to the mark by absorbing part of the risk. At the end of the day, private sphere will have to step in, investment-wise. All right, then. So this leads us into bidding, tender bids, when the state launches major plans in strategic fields. The calculation cluster, for example, that was subject to a number of tender bids, but there are other examples. But where do things stand in quantum with regard to tender bids? Well, what we've launched in France, we've got an initial round of research, which is called which is something which is cross-cutting, which covers computation, which covers algorithms, sensors, and quantum communication. So this is a first bouquet or package, if you like, research that's done in the public sphere, I clarify. Also, we've launched an initiative, well, let's put it this way, tender bids that will be offered to startups to buy a certain amount of quantum machines to make them available to researchers, but also startups and institutional users like to try out what these machines can offer. That's the second scheme that we announced in January last. Training schemes as well, training initiatives. We're seeing a massive shortfall in skills in the quantum field, across the board. There's going to be competition there for snaring talent. So, we want to increase the number of people who can contribute to developing quantum technologies. Now, they don't necessarily have to be quantum specialists, but each engineer in IT, in an IT curriculum, they should have some module on quantums. So the IT jack of all trades at least have a flavor of understanding of quantum. I didn't do quantum physics in my university courses. Yes, that's interesting. Before we move on, if somebody's looking at us, watching this program today, young engineer or a student for that matter, to reassure them about the fact that quantum is accessible. Could we say that? In the future, can you receive training on quantum to be part of this quantum revolution? Do you want to say something about that?
Well, we've designed a curriculum accessible to any student having a master's degree in science, math, chemistry, physics, whatever. But we decided that we would make this curriculum accessible to all these students. Some of them have never studied quantum mechanics. And in 1 year, we train them, we educate them, and we help them contribute positively to this revolution. It's called RTech. Okay, RTech, that's the curriculum. And entering this revolution, it's important to have this curriculum. Yeah, and it's accessible. And RTech curricula, or similar to RTech curriculum, are opening up everywhere in France. And you need to select a minimum package of knowledge so that a large number of people can contribute. So this revolution is coming up. I wasn't born at the time of the computation plan, but I am alive now, and I might be part of the quantum revolution, or I might see the emergence of this quantum revolution. So, Mr. Martin, what we're talking about is no longer just fundamental research or sci-fi. We're talking about concrete applications, absolutely. What we saw, and what we've been seeing over the last few years, is that we have an increase in research, application research programs, because in quantum physics, we have very clear problems to solve, and there are performances to achieve. So we could say that quantum physics is out of its ivory tower. In the past, academia was looking at speculative ideas. I'm a physicist by trade, and I have great admiration for people doing that. But we should not forget that technology and fundamental science are two sides of the same coin. And for quantum physics, 10 years ago, it was seen as a very abstract discipline reserved to a very small elite of people. But now we see this virtuous circle being put in place, and experimental progress has helped technology progress, which then raised an interest in public and private entities. So quite a few technologies, like nuclear technologies, and I like to make a comparison with fusion. When you work in nuclear fusion, you don't care about equations that allowed you modeling the turbulences, for instance. You have an issue, you want to sort it out. And likewise, with quantum physics, what we want to do with a computational machine, you don't care about quantum physics. What you want to have is a supercomputer. And once you have this supercomputer, you can address fundamental research issues with greater capabilities. Okay, so this construction has already started, but it's very delicate, very tricky. It needs to be improved. So how can we better control this quantum applicative science or application science? Well, quantum in all its variance is based on superimposition, intrication principles. So quantum information, superimposition remains very fragile, and any noise can destroy it. So if we want to tame this, we have to address number one priority, which is to decouple qubits from their environment while maintaining control. And that's the last blocking point that prevents us from unleashing the huge potential of this quantum revolution. But nowadays, there is a delta between capability and the theoretical needs and required performance to achieve zero fault, which is what we need to achieve with our computation. And you work on this on a daily basis. Can you explain to us what kind of model you're building and what you're doing to improve all this. Because when you get in your lab, what do you work on? Well, one of the things that we are working on is error correction. And that's a theory that we need to broaden, widen in order to reduce the delta I was talking about before between capability and what we actually achieve. So we need interfacing tools between the logic and physical layer. In the logic layer, that's where you have the algorithm, and in a zero-noise context. And the physical layer is where quantum dynamic unfolds, where you have intrications and everything. And what we're trying to achieve is to have an interface tool that would be agnostic with regards to the physical support of the computer. And to achieve that, we use know-how in machine learning, in control, in retroactive loops, in quantum physics, in printed circuit expertise that exists in Saclay and in Grenoble. That's what we do. Okay. In conclusion to this discussion, let's take a look at the economic and industrial applications. So what can our economies do with this quantum revolution?
We are very pleased to welcome you, Esperanza, Cuenca, Góme, your head of strategy and outreach at Multiverse Computing. Can you pitch us a little bit about Multiverse Computing?
Well, we at Multiverse Computing, we are probably the largest quantum software company in Europe. And what we do is that we help businesses to become the best version of themselves through quantum technologies. We also believe in democratizing quantum. We think that quantum is for everyone, and our product Singularity is a good example of this. In this context, we also use what we call quantum-inspired solutions. Quantum-inspired solutions use mathematical formalism called tensor networks, and that allows us to decrease the dimensionality of very complex problems and thus solve them on supercomputers and high-performance computers. So this is what we do, pretty much in a nutshell.
So you just explain a little bit about the necessity of how to democratize quantum technology. Why is it? Why do you want? Could you just explain more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. What we have learned in previous revolutions, in previous technological revolutions, is that when a technology is not democratic in the sense that it is accessible to a broad spectrum of people, and even some groups of countries have some advantages over others. So we can think about these technological asymmetries. The bottom line of this is that that is not something good for the common good. And these asymmetries create also tensions. So, and it has as well very profound implications in ethical terms. So that is why we believe that it's one of the reasons why we believe quantum is for everyone. And this, of course, is also related to the United Nations Sustainability Goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because as we said, it is like, a disruptive technology. Could we say that quantum technology is a necessity for humanity?
I would say, in a sense, it is, because you see, in our businesses, in our societies, we are facing more and more difficult challenges. And what we know at this point is that our technologies, classical technologies, are limited in a sense to do that. So we need to start thinking about other technologies, for example, quantum technologies. And a clear example of this is, for example, the process of nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is the process used to manufacture and create fertilizers. And the classical procedure to do that is not very efficient. Now, through quantum computing, we can gain new insights and simulate better this process, and thus, hopefully, will allow us to develop new nitrogen fixation processes, and then have more efficient ways to produce fertilizers, hopefully reduce the price of those, and in a nutshell, again, making food more accessible to people. And this is, again, something related to United Nations, the sustainability goals.
You just gave us one of the multiple use cases, you know, for big industries, but also maybe probably for small businesses in the future. Any other use case that you could give us, illustrating how quantum technology is, you know, so...
Yeah, of course. Well, we can think of use cases in the financial sector. This was one of the best, one of the first sectors where we started identified use cases. At Multiverse, we have done work with, for example, Spanish bank BBVA in dynamic portfolio optimization. Recently, with Bank of Canada, simulating the behavior of cryptocurrency markets, and so on and so forth. We can think of more examples. There are examples as well in smart manufacturing to improve using quantum machine learning manufacturing processes, and hopefully gaining savings and efficiencies in that realm. And any other sectors we can think about are, for example, aerospace and, of course, cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was just maybe my last question for you, Esperanza. You talked previously about encryption, you know. It seems that this is something very, very interesting to explore more, and some startups, you know, are going deeper into that new space in a way, meaning how to encrypt differently. A lot of people are even, you know, saying that internet is like, you know, in a disruptive way, because it's all about how to change the accessibility of the internet. Is it your point of view?
Well, in many sense, I absolutely share your views. When we talk about cybersecurity, it's good to distinguish between two aspects and the internet. Let's say cybersecurity and the internet, and you were explaining it beautifully. Now, when we think about cybersecurity, we know that the classical internet is vulnerable to what we call a quantum attack, and we also know that there are nefarious actors doing something called harvest now, decrypt later. This means that the suspicion is that there are nefarious actors harvesting our data, that currently they cannot do much with that because it's encrypted. But then they are hoping that in the future, when there is a quantum computer powerful enough, they will be able to decrypt it. Yeah. And that is very worrisome. So what can we do about this? And this, coming to your point, and you were explaining it very well, now it's where quantum encryption and post-quantum encryptions scheme come into play. And it's important for businesses and for societies and for governments to get ready, to get all the infrastructure ready to sustain a quantum attack. Mm-hmm. On your second point, which is about the quantum internet, that is using quantum phenomena like entanglement and teleportation to have a totally different paradigm of the internet and of sending information.
Yeah, because it all changes the way that we have built standards, you know, in terms of security, meaning how to secure the global internet. Yeah. But with quantum technologies, it is like the dark and the light side. It's the dark side, meaning it's very vulnerable because we can have, a lot of a new paradigm in terms of passwords. Mm-hmm. But it's a new era opening to different way to how to secure the cyberspace. So it's very interesting to deeply follow and how to build innovation around that. Thank you so much. That panel discussion is ending. Thank you very much for being with us. Merci beaucoup à tous nos invités. On les applaudit bien fort.
Thanks to all our panelists. Thank you all very much indeed.
Et après, tu as compris le quantique, Alexandre, j'en suis sûr.
I guess you understood what quantum technologies are about, Alexandre. Yeah, absolutely. I'm fine. Okay, now you can have a talk with our friends to follow this training curriculum that we talked about. And we'll talk about this, but it's time for Spring 50, a new pitch session with you, Alexandre. We're going to talk about innovation and mobility.